All right. Hello, and welcome to today's live or today's video, wherever you're watching this, where we're going to be talking about how to trust our intuition. So can I trust my intuition, especially when we feel like we have attempted to trust our intuition, we have attempted to trust our guidance, we've attempted to trust ourselves, that we can make good decisions for ourselves in our lives, and we have gone in a certain direction or done a certain thing, and it didn't work out how we thought it was going to. It led to pain. We were wrong. We fell flat on our face. We were wrong about the relationship. We were wrong about the job. We were wrong about the thing that was going to heal us, whatever it is. And more than this, I feel like I want to talk about like intuition in general and connecting to like a higher source of information or some wisdom that we couldn't possibly know on our own, because I feel like this is something that is talked about so much in the spiritual community and so much in the self-help and personal growth and personal development world, and it's made out to be something that I think that it isn't. And I think that it has also a lot of the time a lot of like religious context and a lot of baggage that comes along with it that sort of clouds what this can be for us. And I want to speak to this idea of being connected to higher wisdom and to information we couldn't have possibly known on our own and all this stuff from a vantage point that is not religious in any way. Not to say that if you are religious or that you have religious beliefs or that you have your ideas of what intuition is and where that comes from and what you're connecting to when you're connecting to something greater than yourself. If you have those ideas and that resonates for you and that really works for you and that really fits with your life, do that, right? Like I am absolutely not here to tell you that you're wrong. I'm not telling you to have different beliefs. And I hope that what I'm saying will fit into that, because I do believe that honestly, at the end of the day, everyone has access to information. I believe that everyone has access to wisdom. I believe that everyone has access to guidance and support that maybe goes beyond what we would think we could know on our own. I really, truly believe that we all have access to that. And again, like I know that a lot of the time my videos can come across like very biology and very nervous system and very just grounded in the earth. And that's because I just really believe that there is no separation between the spiritual and the physical. And I believe that the more that we understand about the physical and the more we understand about our biology and the more we understand about our nervous systems and our programming and all this stuff, the more I think spirituality will take on a flavor that is far less based in superstition a lot of the time, and based in judgment, and based in like you're being punished or you're being rewarded or you're being good and you're bad, and kind of all of these stories that can make us feel really terrible. And I believe we feel really terrible because that's our bodies telling us that these stories aren't true. But like I say, I really want to talk about this intuition thing because, again, I think it's something that we all want to believe is real, at least, right? Because I don't think any of us want to believe that all we have is just our minds and ourselves and what we've experienced and what we can know logically, and that's it. That's all we have access to. And hopefully if there's something we don't know, someone around us knows it, right? And I think that a lot of us can really feel that way, that we can really feel like we can't trust ourselves. We don't feel like we have access to anything greater than ourselves. We feel very overwhelmed. We feel like like I say, we can't trust ourselves. We feel like anytime we've tried to make our own decisions or go our own way or whatever, it's not worked out, or we've hurt ourselves, or something terrible has happened, and we just feel lost and confused. And so I want to speak to that today, okay? So getting started, I believe that the human being, as far as wisdom and as far as knowledge and as far as understanding goes, I believe we kind of have four main sources of information. And also, just quickly before I get started, like basically to wrap up what I was just saying in the intro there, that, you know, when we talk about intuition and when we talk about following our feelings and being able to trust ourselves, we're always talking about things we couldn't possibly know. entering situations we haven't experienced before, stuff we don't have pre-experience with, stuff that isn't completely something we are familiar or comfortable with, or that we don't have experience with, and understanding that, like, right, like, life is always going to be that. We're never going to know it all. We're never going to have experienced everything there is to experience, and now everything is just second nature to us. Life is always going to be handing us something new. Life is always going to be handing us something challenging, because life, its one constant is that it's constantly growing, right? The one constant in this reality is that it's always changing. And so that feeling of being overwhelmed, and that feeling of like constantly like being on a life treadmill and we feel like we're just like a half a pace behind, or that feeling that like just when we think we've got it all figured out, some random thing happens, or feeling like we've just never had it figured out, like life has just always been hard and confusing and we don't have it figured out and things just keep getting scarier and more painful. Or, like I say, we have dreams, we have goals, we have things that we want to accomplish, things we want to experience, things we want to have that we've never had before, things that we've had before but we want to have again, things that matter to us, healing, relationships, jobs, travel, all of these things. And we want to believe that we're making progress in the right direction, going somewhere we've never gone before. Yes? And we want to believe that we're healing, or that we're integrating, or that whatever we're doing right now is the key to getting us where we want to go, even though where we want to go is often, like I say, somewhere we've never been before, something we've never experienced before. And that can leave us feeling very vulnerable and very much like, I don't know how to figure it out because I've never been there before. I haven't seen it before. I don't know what I'm doing. And this has been something that I have heard from a lot from people in my life who, so another thing before we get started is I just want to say that, like, off the bat, I am personally someone, and this is not to say that this is the right way to be, or this is a good way to be, or this is how anyone else should be. This is just my nature, and this is just how I have lived my life. I am someone who really trusts and follows and goes after my intuition. And if my sister's on this call, she can like vouch for me that I am someone who has more times than not just jumped off a cliff because my intuition told me to do it. Like, there have been a lot of things in my life where I couldn't have possibly known where I was headed. I was headed in a direction that I had never seen anyone else go before. I was heading towards a thing that I had never experienced before. I had never seen anyone experience before. I had never, right? And I just went for it. And I've lived my life very much in a state of just, this is what I feel like is the right thing to do. And again, like, it's not to say that I'm just like, I feel everything and I just go on every feeling. But, like, I'm very logical. I am also very logical and very reason-based, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I am someone who, like I say, is very much going to follow my intuition. I'm going to follow what my guidance says. I'm gonna take logic into consideration. I'm going to take what consensus reality is and all of these things. I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to mix it with what I'm feeling is the thing that I'm feeling, and I'm going to say, okay, well, this is what I think is the best thing to do, and we're going to do that. And I'm not always right. I haven't always had 100% success. There have been massive failures when I have followed my intuition. So I feel like I have some authority to speak on this idea of going for it and just jumping off the cliff and really believing this is what my intuition told me to do and I'm going to do it, and I jump off that cliff and I fall flat on my face. So I am not here saying I always follow my intuition and it's always perfect. So here, I can guide you in having perfect intuition, because I don't think that's ever going to happen. Okay? This is not what this talk is. I'm not going to tell you how to have perfect intuition because I don't have perfect intuition. But I can tell you that I have learned how to learn from my intuition. I have learned how to learn from my failures. I have learned how to learn from the things that I thought were my intuition, when actually it was not intuition at all. It was trauma, it was my judgment, it was my emotional guidance system, and I was interpreting it wrong. That has happened multiple times, and I've learned how to learn from that. I've picked up on the patterns of that, and that's what I want to teach you, okay? Because again, I believe that we all have access to this intuition, and I also know that, like I say, lots of people are not like me, where that I'm going to just jump off a cliff, I'm going to follow, like, a lot of people feel like they don't have access at all, like they can't see what their intuition is telling them, they can't see anything out beyond what they've experienced. Like, I've heard from a lot of people, they're like, I can't do that, I don't trust it, I don't see anything because I haven't been there. Because I haven't ever experienced that. I have no idea what that is, I've never been there, I've never experienced it, I've never seen it, so I don't have any idea. And I don't possibly know, and I couldn't possibly know, so I'm just going to stay here until something becomes obvious. And in my experience, that's just not how reality works. So much of the time, we're never going to actually know until we go. A lot of this life, where we are living in a constant state of unknown, is going and finding out. We're not going to know until we go. Yes? And okay, so in ceremony recently, it came through so clearly that the intuition of the feminine is so dialed in. Great. I'm so happy for that awareness for you. Yeah, totally. So what and we must step into the unknown, and that's what it is, right? Like, we're not using our intuition to guide us into something we already know about. You see what I'm saying? Like, no one needs to use their intuition to, like, go to the bathroom that they in their house, because that's where it is. That's awareness. Yeah, that's lived experience. That's stuff we already know, places we've already been, things we've already done. That's a technology. Yeah, and so, like I say, when we're talking about intuition, we're talking about going where we haven't gone before. We're talking about going places maybe we've never seen anyone else go before, having healing we've never seen anyone else have. All of that stuff, this is what we're doing. And so there's always going to be this element of having to trust something, having to go for something, having to take a step in a direction we've never gone before, and seeing how it goes. Because that's what this life is, okay? So again, a lot of the time, the first thing with intuition is to realize that the reason we want it, the reason we want to have a really clear intuition, the reason we want our intuition to be strong, the reason we want to believe that intuition exists, the reason we want to believe that higher guidance and higher wisdom exists, and if we just do all the right things and practice all the right practices and kundalini ourselves enough, we will have access to this higher wisdom at all times, and then we will never have pain again. And we will always be able to get to where we want to go. And we want a guarantee of safety. We want a guarantee of outcome. We want a guarantee. And for me, from my experience, what I have seen in myself and what I have seen in others, a huge part of why I have been able to live my life following my intuition and going after things where I just will jump off the cliff and see what happens, and have been able to create a life for myself that literally I had no idea about, right? That this life that I've created for me has been very much me following intuition, because there was just so much I didn't know about getting to where I am and experiencing what I've experienced and all that stuff. And then I know a lot of people who are still living the same life today they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I started. And the main difference that I see a lot of the time between people like me who follow their intuition and have a life story that's very like woo-woo and magical and all these magical things happening, and people who just seem to have like a very mundane, nothing really happens for them life, a lot of the time the difference is that I have been willing to fail. Like, I think that this is like something that's just very important when we are wanting to trust our intuition. It's that I don't trust myself to be right all the time. I don't trust that my intuition is always going to be 100%. I don't believe that I'm ever going to protect myself from all pain. I don't believe that everything that I want and everything that I am going after is possible. I don't know that, right? Like, I don't know that until I die, and it either did or it didn't happen. The thing that has made it, the real thing that's made it possible for me to live a life where I've taken all the leaps and I've done all the things and I've had all the magical experiences is the fact that I've been willing to fail, that I've been willing to be wrong, that I've known, like I say, that my intuition isn't always going to be right, or that my interpretations of my feelings and my interpretations of my whatever it is, guidance that I'm getting, isn't always going to be right. And rather than living a life where I'm trying to avoid suffering at all costs, or where I feel like it's a failure if I don't get where I want to go every single time I take a step, and understanding too that even getting where I want to go is going to require failures. It's going to require taking steps, seeing that it didn't get me where I wanted to go, and being willing to learn from that, and then use that information for my next step. Use that information to hone how I'm interpreting my feelings, how I'm interpreting my intuition, all of these things. So right off the bat, I just want to say that like a huge part of trusting yourself, a huge part of trusting your intuition, a huge part of learning to trust the complex guidance that we get as human beings is being willing to fail and being willing to be wrong and being willing to have pain sometimes and struggle that we like cause ourselves because we jumped and then we didn't know and we were wrong and all this stuff, and saying, I trust myself to figure it out. I trust myself to learn from it. And that's why I teach self-love as the foundation to everything. To me, self-love is the foundation to true spirituality. To me, self-love is the foundation of true intuition. To me, self-love is the foundation of true just growth. If you're not spiritual at all and you're just the kind of person who wants to live your life and feel like you're growing, self-love is the base. Because what self-love does, yes, is it programs to our nervous system. It says to our nervous system, we are going to be okay. No matter what's happening, no matter what's going on in our reality, it works both ways. We can be completely surrounded by people who love us, food, money in the bank, literally as safe as a person can be on the planet, and feel like we're going to die when we're being internally rejected by ourselves. We can be, okay, and again, don't jump ahead. I'm going to put a caveat on this, but just listen to the whole thing, okay? We can be in a state where we don't have access to anything. We're literally completely without food. We have no idea where the next paycheck is coming from. We're actually in a situation of scarcity. And if we have self-love, if we feel like we are being loved and accepted, it's going to shift our biochemistry. It's going to shift our neurology into a state where whatever is figure outable from where we are, we will be able to figure it out. Whatever the next step is for us, if there is a next step that we can take, we will be able to find it. If there is a piece to find in what we're in, we will be able to find it. And from that place, so again, this is not to say that self-love means you don't need food, and that if you're in a terrible situation, you'll just be able to be blissful and peaceful in that situation. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that when you're in that horrible situation, and you can signal to your body that you love yourself and that you accept yourself and that you're not blaming yourself and you're not making yourself wrong for where you are and you're not being rejected, there's a shift in the way that you think, in the way that your mind is working, right? It's literally shifting out of fight and flight and into rest and digest, where your higher reasoning, your higher complex thinking, your capacity to take in a bigger picture, your capacity to figure out stuff that you've never seen before comes online. Okay, and I know that's just like biology and that sounds really basic, but we have so much access to being able to figure things out, to being able to take steps, to being able to go from where we are to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, which can look like and can feel like magical, intuitive, how did I possibly know that, access to information I couldn't have possibly known at any other time when we do it. Because so much of the time, so many of us are just living in that fear state. And this is part of the reason why we feel so helpless, and why we feel like we have no idea what's going on, and why we feel like we can't trust ourselves, and why we do the same things over and over and over again and expect different results, or can't get ourselves to change, and all of these things. It's because we're constantly being triggered into this state of fight and flight. And in our state of fight and flight, we can only do what we've always done. Like, really, change from that place is incredibly difficult. Whereas change from a place of feeling loved, feeling supported, feeling like we're good enough, puts us into a completely different biochemical state where we have access to seemingly higher reasoning and wisdom and all of these things that we just didn't before. We have access to taking steps. We will trust ourselves a little bit more to take a step, and even if it doesn't go exactly how we thought it was going to go, or even if there's pain, or even if it's okay, because that's the second thing, right? The learning to make mistakes, and to fall, and to fail, and to have things go wrong, and not shame ourselves, and not guilt ourselves, because again, that's a protective mechanism. That's a protective mechanism we learn in childhood, that when something hurts, we blame ourselves and we shame ourselves to try to get ourselves to never do that again. That's why we learned that. We learned that blame and shame was the way to protect ourselves from pain. That if we can make everything painful in our life experience our fault, we can figure out why that was horrible that we did that, or something bad about us. If we can make it our fault, we feel like we can control it, because then we'll just never do that again. And we need to learn, like slowly, viscerally learn that we can make mistakes, that we can be in pain, that we can do things wrong, that we can get things wrong, and still have love, and still have, it's okay. It's okay. Because then from that place, we can say, okay, what happened? What did I learn? What did I think was going to happen? What did my intuition tell me seemingly before I took this step? And maybe how have I interpreted it incorrectly, and all these things? When we have practiced this, it's okay. I love you. I'm here with you. No matter what happens, we're going to figure this out together. You didn't do it wrong. You didn't do it bad. There's nothing wrong with you. It's okay that you didn't know what you didn't know. It's okay that you're scared. It's okay. It's okay. I still love you. I still love you. And we practice that over and over and over and over and over again. And that muscle gets built over and over and over. Right? Every time we feel guilt, every time we feel shame, every time we feel lost, every time we feel confused, we give ourselves that unconditional love over and over and over and over again. Like I say, you build it like a muscle until eventually it starts to feel real. It starts to feel like something. And you will start to feel yourself shift from that fear state into that rest state. And again, it's not to say that from that rest state you're going to have all of your answers just pop into your mind, or everything's going to become clear, or there's going to be a moment. Rather, you're going to be able to see your next step. You're going to be able to learn from what you just did. You're going to be able to understand something you didn't understand before, put it into context. Use it to inform your next step. Being willing to fail, being willing to be wrong, being willing to look stupid, being willing to maybe get hurt in some ways. And I think that that's another thing, right? A lot of the time, with my following my intuition and my following my gut and my saying, okay, I'm going to jump off the cliff, a lot of the time the way that I did it was by saying to myself, okay, what is the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen if I take this step? Like really, like what could go as wrong as possible? If I do this, yeah, of course, there's the hope it's going to go as good as possible. But there's always the chance it's going to go as terrible as possible. And my question to myself was always, okay, if that terrible thing were to happen, What would I do? And am I willing to risk that? Like, just being very realistic about these things and just saying, okay, here's what my intuition is telling me to do. Here's what I hope will happen if I do that. Now, there's always the chance that that's not going to happen, that the worst thing is going to happen. And so what could that be? And what would I do if that happened? Because a lot of the time, again, we are so afraid to follow our intuition because we're not really taking into account what could go wrong and then setting ourselves up to deal with that. Yeah? Like, okay, could I hold myself through that? Could I figure something out? Am I willing to take the step, even if the thing goes horribly wrong, and figuring it out from there? And I think a lot of us will find that the fear of following our intuition actually diminishes quite a bit when we get honest with ourselves about how horrible it could be, and then we make a plan for what we will do if it goes wrong. Right? A lot of us are really afraid to trust our intuition because we just really want to hope that it's going to be as good as we think, but we have in the back of our mind a fear that it's not going to go good. We have in the back of our mind that fear that it's not going to work out, and sometimes the best thing to do about that is just to face it, to look it straight in the face and say, okay, am I willing to take the jump, the leap, even if it goes as horrible as possible? Could I figure it out? And a lot of the time we're going to say, yeah, okay. And then sometimes we're going to say, nope, absolutely not. If it's even possible that it's going to go that way, it's not worth it for me. And we need to be honest with ourselves about that. There are going to be times where your intuition tells you to do something, and you're like, yeah, okay, but the worst thing that could happen there is like so bad, I am not willing to go there. And I think we just need to be honest with ourselves with that sometimes. We just need to say, okay, not ready, don't want to, not gonna, I need a different step. I need a different step. Okay. So that's that. Next thing. With intuition and with humans and our awareness and figuring things out and knowing things before we can know them and all of these things, it is my belief, and again, now I'm just going to talk about my beliefs and my experience, how I see things, and I'm not going to tell you why, okay? I'm not going to tell you how we have intuition. I'm not going to tell you what higher guidance it is or where it's coming from, because I believe, right, like we all have our own stories and we all have our things that resonate with us, and I don't believe that what I'm about to say has to contradict any of those stories. So you fit this into what you believe and what works for you and what you think feels resonant for you, and leave anything that doesn't. Okay, so you add in whatever feels like needs to be added, take out anything you feel needs to be taken out to make it feel right for you. All right, so as far as my awareness goes, it seems like humans have 4 different kind of like categories of awareness that all come together to make the 5th category that I think is our intuition. Okay, so number 1, we have our logic and our intellect, and that is highly trained and that is highly praised in our culture, and that is the logical, like, think of it like the manager. Like, our logic is just give me the thing I want, give me how we're going to get there, and I will come up with the path for how we're going to do that. The logic is everything we've experienced before, right? Everything we've seen before, all the pattern recognition. It's our accumulation of lived experience and information we've taken in from other sources. It's the logical, the head, brain. There's that, right? And then there's the kind of like the lower levels of that and the higher complex reasoning of that. But it's the stuff we've experienced and stuff we've learned, the logical, the verbal intellect, okay? Second thing, we have our emotions. So we have our emotional guidance system. That is another huge part of our lived experience here. We have an emotion that connects with every single experience we've ever had. We have joy, we have sadness, we have anger, we have stress, we have all of these different emotions. And to me, emotions are not good or bad, they're not right or wrong. There is no good, I don't believe there are higher and lower emotions. Again, to me, it's just information. It's just it's a part of our experience here. It's a part of our lived experience. It's information. And this is the part, like, this is one part of ourselves that is heavily just muted and not celebrated, and we're taught to shut these parts of ourselves down as much as possible in our culture. So this is a part of our intuition that most of us have very little access to. The emotional intelligence, the sadness, the anger, the joy, the expansion, all of these things, we have that, okay? Third part is feeling. So there's difference between emotions, sadness, anger, happiness, joy, and feeling, okay? So there's the body. So you can almost think of it like that: mind, body, and emotion. So the feeling place is, again, something most of us are completely cut off from. Our feeling, like our physical, heavy, dense, tight, expansion, zinging, zooming, all of these things, right? Like when people talk about their Kundalini awakening experiences and they talk about their meditation experience and all these things, a lot of the time it's just people coming back online to like physical sensation. Because for me as someone who was never able to numb my physical body, and as someone who has always been very, very aware of my physical sensations, a lot of times people explain to me their like Kundalini experiences or their activation experiences and all of these things that are happening, and I'm like, isn't that just a Tuesday? Like, isn't that just what the body, like what it feels like to be in a body? And I think, again, it's not that I'm special or anything like that. It's just to say that I believe that, again, those experiences are happening all the time. Most of us are just not aware of it because we're not in our bodies. We're not feeling our feelings. We're not feeling our physical sensations on a regular basis. And that's a huge part of information we're cut off from, okay? And then there's the fourth part, which, again, I'm not going to tell you where or how or if this comes about, because I'll tell you that in a second. But the fourth part is the stuff we just couldn't possibly know, okay? And I think all of us have had an experience where we like knew the phone was about to ring and we knew who it was going to be before it happened, or we knew where the parking spot was going to be. We like saw it in our mind and there it was. Or we booked a trip to be at a place at a specific time and it ended up that all these things happened all at once and we were totally right. There's this fourth, just access to information we couldn't have possibly known. And again, a lot of religion and a lot of the reason why people get spiritually traumatized is because a lot of, like I say, just religion or spirituality, self-help, personal growth, whatever, tells us that when something painful happens, that when our intuition is wrong, that when, like I say, we're constantly in these situations where bad things are happening to us, we're being told it's because we're being punished, or we're not loved by God, or that we're not loving God properly, or that how we're living, like I say, we're being punished, we're being tested. And this was also my conditioning growing up, right? Like I was told that I was suffering, or that things were going wrong in my life, or that I wasn't getting the results that I wanted, and I was sick, and I was sad, and I didn't have love, and I didn't have all these things, and I couldn't figure things out, because I was being tested, because God was testing me, because I wasn't praying enough, I wasn't sacrificing enough, I wasn't doing enough, it was some form of punishment or some form of test from the universe, or from God, or whatever. And that teaching and that messaging over and over and over again, that my suffering was all my fault, right? And again, this is like something we're taught in spirituality and self-help and self-improvement, that like you are completely in control of your reality. And so if anything is terrible happening in your reality, it's because of you. And it's your failure, and it's you making wrong choices or having the wrong emotions or all of these things. And this constant bad things are happening to you, or you're not getting the things that you want because you suck. Okay? And I know that's not everyone and that's not everything, but this can be a lot of what we associate with God or with the universe or with higher wisdom or higher guidance, right? So like there's parts of us or groups of us who really want to believe that we're guided by something higher than ourselves, that want to believe that there's something out there that loves us and that cares about us, that we're connected to, that is connected to us, that cares about us, that cares about our individual life, and is like leading and guiding and giving us this information we couldn't possibly have access to any other way. Right? There's a whole group of us that need to believe that. So when I talk about all the biology and all that stuff, it can be very triggering and feel like, well, then what? That's it? It's just biology? It's just me? I'm here all alone, and then that's it? And then it can feel like what I'm saying is that that's it. There is nothing else. And then we feel all alone, and we feel like we're going to die and never be able to figure anything out, never get anywhere, because we need something higher than ourselves. We need something higher than this life. We need something higher than that. Or on the other side, people can feel like if I say, yes, there's this higher thing guiding you and this higher wisdom and this higher awareness, it can feel like what I'm saying is there's that God or that universe or that whatever judging thing that is out there judging you and controlling your life and dictating your life, and you don't have control, and you're going to be punished, and there's all these rules that you don't know what they are, but you know that you're failing because that's why bad things are happening, and there's that, right? So, right, it can feel like half the people out there feel like if I'm telling you that there's a higher wisdom, that's horrible, because it's a higher wisdom that's judging you and that has rules and laws that you don't know or that you're trying to figure out and you can't, and that it's just if you don't follow them perfectly, and this is why everything bad is happening to you. Or the other half that feels like if I say there's higher wisdom and if I don't say that there's higher wisdom and that there's higher guidance, they're going to say, well, then I'm all alone and there's no point to life and I should just give up. And what I'm saying is, for me, my experience of higher wisdom and higher guidance isn't either of these things, okay? And so that's kind of what I want to say again, is that what I have come to about intuition didn't come from religion and didn't come from New Age spirituality. It came from my experience of what I've been through. And like I say, I can't explain why or how, and I'm not going to attempt to do that. Yes, in this video, I am not trying to attempt to explain where that higher wisdom or understanding comes from, because I don't know. And I think that I just want to be honest about that, right? Like, I don't know. I have had experiences in my life that I cannot explain. I have had understandings of things I couldn't possibly have known that have been completely correct, and I have no idea where that came from. I have no idea where that came from. And so I'm not going to sit here and say, I know what that is, and here's what it is, and here's what you have to believe. What I am going to say is that I do believe that we all have access to guidance and information that is there to support our journey. And the other thing is, the main reason I left Christianity, one of the main reasons I left Christianity, was because my spiritual experience of this higher wisdom, higher guidance, this thing that was helping me, my feelings, my emotions, my intellect, and what I was being told was the truth about these things, didn't match. That is part of the reason I left. And that's part of the reason I've never been able to glom on to any guru or teacher or lineage in any other line of spirituality ever since leaving Christianity, because none of it has tracked with my lived experience. None of it has made sense to me as I haven't experienced a judging God. I do not believe that people who are struggling on this planet are struggling because they're being judged. And I do not believe that people are in a place of not having what they need or being in pain or any of these things because they're not doing good or because they're not loved or because they're not worthy of anything. Like, it's, that just does not align at all with what I have experienced higher wisdom and guidance to feel like and be like for me and for the people that I love and the people that I've seen. And like I say, the second thing is I have seen that literally everyone has access to it. There are some simple tools that, like I say, I'll teach you before the end of this class, that when practiced by literally anybody, no matter what you believe, no matter what resonates with you, there is access. Okay? And like I say, that's why I teach the tools that I teach. Like to say, I'm going to teach this before the end. This is all I teach. Is literally everything about the self-love journey. Is making yourself safe, compassion for yourself, and curiosity for what's going on around you. That's it. You want to develop your intuition? Have that. Because then you're going to be able to access your body, you're going to access your feelings, you're going to put that together with your intellect, you're going to have access to higher wisdom and higher reasoning because you've gotten out of stress state and into rest and digest, and you're going to have the capacity to learn from your experience. You're going to be brave enough to take a step, even though you don't know, and it might go terribly, and then you'll learn from it instead of blaming yourself and going back into your hidey hole. Like, this is basically what this is. And this then can turn into a very magical life. This can turn into a very, like, seemingly supernatural life. When we live this for long enough, it can start to get to the point where people, like what I have experienced, like people in my life have looked at me and like thought that I had some like direct line, like because it was just so obvious to me that these steps were the steps we should take and the things we should do, and it was going to work out this way. And it was clear as day in my mind, clear as day in my vision, and everyone else was like, what are you freaking talking about? Like, we couldn't know that doesn't make any sense. It might maybe sort of go that way, but how could that? There have been so many times where my husband has looked at me and been like, you are nuts. Like, this is not, we don't need to do this. We don't need to do this right now. This is not how, and then it turns out if we hadn't done it in that moment, nothing would have worked. Anyways, bottom line being, in my experience, there is no judging God. There is no universe that is testing you. No. We live on a planet that is incredibly complex, where we have inherited things, systems, bodies, ways of being that are painful and that are out of alignment, and ways of being that are in alignment. And like I say, because we have been so trained to disconnect ourselves from our bodies and disconnect ourselves from our emotions, and because our pain and pleasure wires have been so crossed, and because more than anything, we've been trained to misinterpret our emotions and our feelings. This is why I think so many of us feel like we don't have access to intuition or we can't trust ourselves. Because how we've been trained to interpret our feelings and our emotions and what we have been told these things mean is often completely the opposite of what they actually mean and what's actually happening. Right? So like, again, when we have a thought and it feels terrible, it feels heavy, it feels bad in our bodies, it makes us have an emotional reaction. Most of us have been trained that means that whatever we just thought is true. If something makes you feel terrible about yourself, if something makes you feel insignificant, if something makes you feel guilt and shame, it's true. The worse something feels, the more true it is. That's what we have been trained to believe in society. And this is part of why we don't have access to our intuition. Because in real reality, the worse something feels, the less true it is. When something feels terrible, it's not true. And then again, that's not to say that its opposite is true. And that's not to say that the whole thing about it isn't true. Because like, we can say, someone that I love passed away and that feels horrible. So does that mean that didn't happen? No. it means that what we're making that mean, what we're making their passing away mean, might not be true. Or it could be that we just need to be sad for a while. We need to experience an emotion, and we're in resistance to an emotion that is just necessary for processing. So learning our emotional mastery, which is huge, just learning how to feel emotions without reacting or responding to them. Okay, so let's back up for a sec. How do we start to develop our intuition? Number one, we get real good and comfortable with the idea that we're not always going to be right. And that learning to trust ourselves means developing a new relationship with being wrong and being in pain. So a lot of us are going to have to start here, and this is going to be where we work for a while, is learning that when we're in pain, that when things go wrong, when people get upset with us, when we have that shame and that guilt over our lives constantly, when we feel lost, when we feel scared, the first step is, this is not my fault. I am not bad. I didn't just do something to hurt myself or others on purpose. This was the best I knew to do in this moment, even if I feel like I knew something better and I should have known better and I could have done better and I didn't. We assume innocence in ourselves. This is the base foundation practice for every other advanced spiritual technique you ever want to get into. Making yourself safe, assuming innocence, looking for the need, looking for where you learned that this was the only way to survive, this was the only way to be safe, looking for the innocence in yourself. Being willing to say, I'm not broken, I'm not bad, I'm not shameful, I'm not guilty, even when society is saying you should be doing more, you should be doing better, you should be different, you should be here, you should be that. Look at all these other people, they're doing this, and we have all these messages coming in all the time. Learning to be on our own side. I'm here for me. This isn't my fault. I can figure this out. I didn't do something wrong. I'm going to learn from this. And learning from something is not an admission of guilt. You didn't know what you didn't know. That's okay. You knew it intellectually, you couldn't follow through with it. That's your nervous system. That's okay. We all have that. Starting with compassion for yourself when you're in pain, when you feel guilt, when you feel shame, and then that curiosity. Why do I feel guilty about this? Where did I learn that I have to feel guilty about this? Where did I learn that I have to feel shameful about this? What did I just learn having gone through what I just went through? If it's okay to make mistakes, if it's okay to do what I just did. Okay, and then sometimes with that we need to learn to orient, because we're going to feel like, nope, I just totally destroyed my whole life. Someone's mad at me. I disappointed someone. Someone's not okay with me. I made this huge mistake. I'm not going to be okay. And we're getting triggered into childhood state where we feel like someone being mad at us or a mistake that we made or something that we did is irreparable. And we have to come back into our moment, do that 5 things we see, 4 things we feel, 3 things we hear, 2 things we smell, 1 thing we taste, 5 things that are going well in our lives, grounding into what's actually happening. So someone's mad at us. Someone's disappointed in us. We made a mistake. What is the real reality? Do we still have a house to live in? Do we still have food? Do we still have access to something? You see, we have to continually draw ourselves back to the present to be in this moment, to see what's really happening. What did I just learn? What are my next steps? So loving ourselves, safe inside, curiosity for what happened, and then just taking those little steps to support ourselves and slowly showing ourselves we're okay. We can make mistakes and recover. We can learn from it and do something different next time. And just being with ourselves, supporting ourselves, that's number 1. Okay, so that's going to be where a lot of us stay for a long time. Just learning how to be nice to ourselves, learning how to love ourselves, learning how to be on our own side. because that is, again, the foundation for learning to tune into intuition and develop emotional mastery and develop tuning into your feelings and all of these things, which take us into these higher, whatever you want to label it as. It starts with the nervous system shifting. Okay? Second thing, we start to learn, so we're learning how to be on our own side, we're learning to be there. Second thing, we start to learn how to process emotion and feeling. So again, a lot of us think we're hearing our intuition, think we're following our intuition, think our emotions are telling us this, or that our body is telling us this, and all of these things. And we're doing these things over and over and over again. We're acting on our intuition, we're acting on our feelings, and it's not going how we thought it was going to go. And we're doing that because we have a judgment of what our emotion means, and then a judgment of what our feelings mean that aren't in alignment with reality. We have made this feeling mean I should do this, and every time we do that, it doesn't work out. We've made this emotion mean this I should do this, or this I should do that. So when I feel this, when I'm around this person, it means this. When I feel this way, when I go for this job, it's like, and we have to start to get curious, beginner's mind, about our emotions and our feelings. So the second practice for developing your intuition is learning how to observe your emotions, to observe your feelings without acting on them. Get curious about the stories you're telling yourself about them. And then getting really honest with yourself about the actual outcome when you follow that story. Because again, for a lot of us, we are making all these assumptions all day long about what our feelings and what our emotions mean. And we're acting on it, and then we're getting the same results over and over again and wondering why we can't trust our intuition. And again, it's not our fault. It's just that we've been trained to interpret our emotions and to interpret our feelings incorrectly. And we have to retrain. So this was a huge part of, for me too, right? Like, and I was traumatized in relationships. I was traumatized in life. So a lot of like what I believed actions from my husband meant and how I felt about it was totally out of alignment with what was actually happening. I would have a very deep attraction to people who were not going to treat me well. And right, there was this instant attraction, this feeling of wanting to be their friend, this feeling of wanting to insert myself. And it was my trauma that was leading me, and my trauma. And so rather than, again, trying to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to listen to my feelings, or I'm not going to listen to my emotions because they're always wrong and I'm traumatized. Or even to say that just because we learned something through a trauma that it's wrong. That's not true either. Sometimes we are going to have a trauma response to someone, and it's totally correct. We learned it through a traumatizing experience, but now it's like your body's coming online saying, like, I've felt this before. I've been here before. Don't go there. And the body is saying no, and we need to listen to that. So again, this is all so much harder to actually do than it is what I'm saying. But this is the practice. The first thing is learning to just observe your emotions and observe your feelings. And that's going to be huge for a lot of us. Can you sit and just feel what you're feeling? Buzzing, tingling, tightness, expansion, and notice all the stories you're wanting to tell yourself about it. Yeah? Say, okay, thank you. Those are the stories I usually tell. That's great. Awareness. But I'm just going to practice just feeling for a little bit. Okay, so like a huge part of developing intuition is learning how to slow down and feel. Learning how to slow down and experience before we understand it. And this is a big challenge for a lot of us. Because we want the information right now, we want it to be intellectual, we want it to be words, we want it to be an understanding that we can use, that we can act on. And that's not how intuition works. So much of the time, in my experience anyways, intuition is something I feel in my body, and then I have an emotional thing, and then it's pictures and visions, and then eventually it becomes logical, reasonable, here's what I'm going to do about it. It doesn't start with a logical, like, I have had times where I've sat in meditation and just like received a message that was just, you need to do this. That has happened. But more often, it is way more subtle than that. And this is, again, a huge part of why a lot of us don't feel like we have access to our intuition. Because we're rushing around, we're head up, we don't feel, and we're just acting on these impulses that we're not even aware that we're having. Because everything is sped up to like 4,000 times in our culture. So this is a part of breaking out of the matrix, is understanding we have to kind of be counterculture to the rushing. Intuition isn't fast. Intuition isn't this thing that just happens like this. Our guidance takes time. And so building times in our day, just building some times in our day where we are taking space to just feel what our feelings feel like without having to know what it means right now. To be in an emotion, to experience our sadness, to experience our anger, to experience our joy without having to act on it. Just making room for the emotion to exist and to flow through our bodies. So maybe we just need to cry, we need to hit a pillow, we need to scream, we need to journal, whatever we need to do. But, and again, not to say that we aren't going to act on the emotion eventually, not to say that we aren't going to act on the feeling eventually. This is not black and white, but it's saying we need to take that pause to embody the feeling, to embody the emotion. Number one, for a lot of us, to demystify the fear of emotion and the fear of feeling. Because a lot of us are afraid to feel, and we're afraid to have our emotions, because we're afraid they're going to take over. And that's normal. We all feel that way. But I promise you, no matter how intense your emotions are, no matter how intense your feelings are, it will not last forever, and it will not take you over. I am someone who is incredibly emotional, and I feel everything so much more extreme than most people that I know. And I've never been taken down by an emotion or a feeling. There have been times where I thought I was going to die. I really thought it was going to kill me. But it never happened. I'm still here. Okay, so I'm going to say this to you. It's going to feel sometimes like your emotions are going to kill you and you don't know why. Like your feeling is going to kill you and you don't know why. Or that it's never going to change and you're going to feel this way forever. I know. And I promise you that you won't. Just learning to make that space, to be with our emotions, to be with our feelings, to feel. It's not going to be words. It's not going to be information you can use right now. It's not going to be intellect. It's not going to be this. It's going to be down here, and it's going to be mess and flow and all of this stuff, and we got to make room for that. Because the better we get at feeling, the better we get at not acting on the feeling and the emotion right away, the more we get familiar with these things, we can then start to correlate. Okay, when I feel this way, I tell myself this story, I do this thing, and then what's the outcome? And you see how these things are building on themselves, because then you can observe the outcome. And if the outcome isn't what you thought it was, you have the base tool that you already learned of self-love to say, okay, I was wrong. I was wrong about that feeling. I was wrong about that emotion. I took an action based on it, and it wasn't what I thought it was. So, what was it actually? That doesn't mean the feeling didn't exist. That didn't mean the emotion didn't exist. It did. It was just telling you something different than what you thought it was telling you. Right? It doesn't mean the emotion was wrong. It means how you interpreted the emotion was incorrect. It doesn't mean the feeling was wrong. It means how you interpreted the feeling was incorrect. So what did the feeling feel like? And what was the actual outcome? So then next time you feel that feeling, because it will come again, you can say, okay, I usually think this is what it means. But last time that isn't what it meant. So maybe I can get curious. What might this emotion mean, or what might this feeling mean if it wasn't that, what I usually make it mean? What are some alternatives? What else could this be telling me? What else could I try? And that again is huge awareness expansion for most of us. Now we're pattern interrupting ourselves. We're actually going to be able to learn what our emotions and what our feelings are telling us. Because we're not just running the same narrative over and over and over again and then assuming we're terrible and then doing our loops over and over again. We have enough self-love that we don't shame and blame ourselves when we get into pain. We learn. We have enough space that we can feel stuff without acting on it. So then we can get curious about our stories. We can get curious about the outcomes. And we can start building pattern recognition. Because that's a huge thing for my how I have strengthened my intuition. Is the feelings have always been there, the emotions have always been there. But I didn't always know what they meant. And it's taken a lot of practice. Feeling a feeling, acting on it, seeing what the outcome was, learning from that, feeling it again, feeling it, letting it tell me a different story, acting on that. Okay, I got a little bit better result that time. And now, so right, like people a lot of the time ask me, like, how can I tell the difference between a trauma response and a true intuition? Practice. Practice, 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 practice. Be with the feeling. What do I usually tell myself? What do I usually do? What's the actual outcome? Can I try something different next time? Can I question my story about this? What might not be true about this? And then again, getting really good at saying, okay, if something feels terrible, I'm gonna question it. It's not to say that then the opposite is true. It's not to say everything about that is false. It's what I'm making it mean is incorrect. So we question and we question and we question and we question. And when we do this more and more and more, when we start to be able to be slowed down, to be our own safe place, to be curious and compassionate, and to feel, this is when I believe that that's when we start to get really good access to that higher wisdom that we couldn't possibly know, which seems to be maybe like a greater than the sum of its parts of the intellect, the feeling, and the emotion. Of everything coming together, where we're in that place of safety. We're learning how to just feel, like we're in our feelings. We have access to our physical feelings, we have access to our emotions, we have access to our intellect, and these three things come together, so they're not in competition. We're making room for all of them to have their place. And then it's like, we know what we couldn't have possibly known. We put things together we couldn't have possibly put together. We take steps, and it works out. We take steps, and it doesn't work out. And we learn. We keep gathering information. We keep figuring out, okay, this emotion does mean this. I've practiced it enough times that when my emotions are telling me this, that is true. When my feeling is telling me this, it is true. Because what I thought it meant and what I thought I needed to do about it and what I did all gave me the result that I thought I was going to get. I was right. That's how we start to build that. And when we're wrong, back to the drawing board. Okay, what did I feel? What did I think? What could I do a little bit different next time? Let's see. And then you eventually, like I say, get good at feeling a feeling, taking an action, and it goes how you think it's going to go every single time. It's because you practiced awareness. You were curious. Okay? So this is really how we develop that intuition. We make ourselves safe. We get good at feeling. Because again, I really just think that a lot of us feel like we don't have access to anything outside of ourselves because we're just living in logic. We're living in logic and we're telling ourselves incorrect stories about our feelings and our emotions that we've been trained to believe, that we've been taught, that we've been told. And it's this practice of slowing down and getting curious and questioning our stories and learning to feel. Like I can't emphasize this enough. It's not going to be logical right away. It's not going to be something you can use right away. It's going to be overwhelming. Sometimes it's going to feel like when a limb is asleep and then the feeling comes back and it's painful. To have feeling come back, that's what it's going to be for a lot of us. And for a lot of us too who feel very spiritual and we're constantly doing the spiritual stuff and we're looking for the answer and looking for the answer. We need to learn to slow down. Right? We're running ahead. We're looking for that information. We always want the next thing and the next thing and where am I going and what's the bigger purpose and what is all this? And we need to come back to the moment. And we need to learn to slow down. And we need to learn to find the pleasure in right now. We need to learn to find the meaning and purpose right now instead of until my life doesn't have meaning and my life doesn't have purpose until it's perfect and there's no more pain and I figured it all out and I've achieved everything I want to achieve. We need to start to learn to feel in our present moment. What am I feeling? And that anxiety feeling, that adrenaline feeling that a lot of us kind of run on isn't spirituality. That's not intuition. That's not, right? Like that adrenaline is a lot of the time, like, and I'm speaking from personal experience, that's trauma, right? That's pushing us and pushing us and pushing us. And we need to learn to slow down. And like I say, just be with our feelings and be with our emotions and process and cry and do all that stuff. And then, like I say, also really start practicing what feels good in my reality right now. What feels good about my life right now? And we're going to tell ourselves that if I let myself feel good about what's going on right now, I won't achieve my goals. I won't keep going. That's not true. I promise you that's not true. You will actually get clearer on where you want to go and what is true for you. The more you can access pleasure right now and then follow the things that feel good instead of constantly running from what you don't want or pushing towards a goal in a way that's always hard. Okay? Learning to be here. Learning to feel what we're feeling right now. This is where intuition lives. This is where we have access to everything we need to know for the next step. Right here. It's not in the future. It's not over there. It's not when we're perfect. It's not when we're healed. It's not when we're delivered. It's not when all of our trauma is gone. It's right here. And right here, we have to be in our bodies and in our emotions as much as we can. Again, this is not to say you have to be able to be fully embodied because a lot of us are in a lot of pain and we don't want to be. And it's not to say you have to have a complete emotional mastery. You don't. Every little bit that you practice, every little step you take of just learning to be with yourself, to feel, to validate, to make space, and to acknowledge what feels good about this right now, and to focus on that a little bit, to cultivate that a little bit, as much as you're working on the stuff that doesn't feel good, this is how we start to develop that intuition. Okay? So does anyone have any questions before we sign off? I think that was a lot for today. But yeah, I just believe we all have access to it. It's just we need to connect with our bodies. We need to connect with our feelings. We need to connect with making ourselves safe. And we need to question the stories that we've been running and the narratives we've been running and make space for new information. New information. Okay? You're not wrong. You're not bad. We're all going to get it wrong sometimes, and that is totally okay. That is totally okay. That's how it's going to go. If you can learn from it, it's going to empower you. Okay? There is no perfect. There is no always on it. We do the best we can, and we just learn. Okay? So that's that. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, and I'll see you next week in the next video. Mwah! Good night.